With Insight, we continue our journey in San Francisco, and today in Silicon Valley at Index Ventures office, I will be speaking with Index Ventures partner, a renowned Armenian person, Nina Achadyan. Stay tuned for an interesting interview. Thank you very much for agreeing for this interview. I will start with a question that non-finance people don't understand. What does a venture capitalist do?
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for having me, Shachunura Galen. So venture capital is probably one of the most unique jobs on the planet. Essentially, the idea is that you look for phenomenal entrepreneurs and you have the privilege of backing these entrepreneurs. But also, just in addition to giving them money, you really want to make sure that you are a partner for them and that you help them build their entrepreneurship journey from day one, hopefully all the way through IPO.
And how do you decide which budding entrepreneur is a good fit for an investment?
Well, that's really the magic, and that's where the art comes in. At the end of the day, getting to know an entrepreneur over a course of time is really important, because then you can deeply understand the motivations of the person, why they're doing what they're doing. Do they feel an attachment to the problem or have some domain expertise that really gives them unique insight? And so when we think about investing in entrepreneurs, we ask ourselves a bunch of questions. We ask ourselves, was this founder placed on this planet with the sole mission to run this business? We also ask ourselves, what is this person's bar of talent? So one of the questions we'll ask if you come pitch Index is, who do you think is A+? Who's the best person you've hired or the best person you've worked with? And then we will go and meet with those people, because it gives you a sense of what the bar of excellence is of that entrepreneur. And then also we think a lot about, does this person have the 50,000-foot grand vision? But then do they also have the level of detail where they know exactly what business metric is going to drive their business?
Okay, it's very hard. I mean, a lot of work. You are a woman in a male-dominated area, and you are very successful, more successful than many men in the area. What is special that you bring to the table as a venture capitalist?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to maybe my beginnings and personal story. So I grew up in an Armenian family, had a very strong Armenian identity. My family was originally from Adana, Malatya, and Gesaria. And my parents were born both in Baghdad. My dad was born in Fallujah and my mom was born in Baghdad. And when they moved to the United States and when I was growing up, my parents really instilled into me a couple of things that I think I've really carried with me for a long time. The first one was, of course, this amazing Armenian identity and how important that is for me on who I am and the values that I stand for. The second one was this concept of being so lucky to be born in the United States and have the opportunity to work. When my dad moved to the U.S., he had the equivalent of a PhD in electrical engineering and graduated top of his school in Baghdad and was had many, many skills. But when he came to the U.S., he had to wait 7 years for a green card for the right to work. And so he would always tell this story about how I'm so lucky that if I wanted to get a job, at age 16,
you just get it.
I would just get it. And then third was, this concept of the land of opportunity in America, where there was no fear of the government or of having a business taken away from you just overnight due to corruption or war. And it was this concept of you have this incredible place where you have safety and the sky is the limit. And so when I was growing up, my parents really didn't put a lot of pressure on me to get good grades or anything. But I felt like they had done this incredible sacrifice to, drop everything, come to a country very similar to a lot of the immigrant stories of folks that have, moved to the United States. And I just felt like, wow, if I can't make it here, something must really be wrong with me. So that's been a driving factor. And I really thank them for instilling that in me and my brothers, because that is the greatest gift that I think a parent could give.
Yeah, many people take these kind of things for granted. But see, when you are talking and I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, you're not taking it for granted. You're thankful for this, and you use this opportunity. And I know this is a bit out of context, but I asked this question to the mayor of Glendale as well when I was interviewing her. The American dream, a lot of people, they do anything to get to the States. And when you are mentioning it as a land of opportunities, etc., so it's worth the sacrifice if you can use it properly, or no. I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think there's no greater place for things like entrepreneurship, for example, and specifically I would say the Bay Area. I mean, this is really the mecca of where venture capital was born out of. And, some people joke that there's something in the water in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, but sometimes I have to pinch myself every time I come back from traveling and the plane is landing and I just look at the San Francisco skyline and I'm like, wow, the amount of impact the companies in these buildings have had globally. Like you fly over Apple, Google, Salesforce. I mean, the list just goes, NVIDIA, the list goes like on and on and on. It really is a special moment. And so I think that especially for founders and technology, there's really no place like the Bay Area. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we drove to Apple Park yesterday and I was in awe, like, okay, this is real. I'm seeing this, and indeed, a lot of other investment is all about risk taking. It's risk. How do you calculate the risks? And as a second part of the question, what is the biggest risk that you have ever taken in your life? If you want to share it with us.
Oh, sure. It's going to be very unpopular on the show, but I will share it.
Let's do it.
Well, venture capital is bar none the riskiest asset class you could invest in. So, the folks that give us money know, for example, that, most of the startups that we invest in will be zeros. But it also has the greatest upside because you're usually entering at a very, very early stage with these startups. I think the way to think about risk is really to reframe the question and think about the person that you're betting on. At Index, our investment analysis really centers on it's all about the people. It's all about the entrepreneur. That's why we spend so much time trying to understand some of those things that I mentioned before, the motivations of a founder. And we try to build a really close relationship with these entrepreneurs where they really open up about things that they're struggling with, what's going right in the business, what's not. So that's very important for us. And I think that, people that are attracted to venture capital, it's not that you have to be excited to jump out of a plane and skydive type of risk, but you have to be able to dream the dream. You have to be opportunistic, but measured. You have to see the big picture, but also know what the risks are. Yeah. For me, the biggest risk I took in my personal life was I was 21 years old. I just graduated from Harvard. I had a wonderful Wall Street job lined up. And I saw a flyer on a dorm room, bulletin board that said, if you could go anywhere in the world for a full year, where would you go and what would you do? And I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, I've never thought about that. I was just like career, pay off student debt, etc. And I was like, I'd love to go to where my family is originally from, which was Turkey. And, of course, now Turkey. And, I wrote a proposal. I thought that food, especially for Western Armenians and those that live in Turkey today, was the perfect intersection between these two cultures. So I wrote a proposal to go to Turkey to work at a baklava bakery. And,
right after graduating Harvard.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And, it was a few months before my graduation because I was planning to move to New York and take this Wall Street job. And to my shock, I actually got this fellowship. It's called the Rockefeller Fellowship. And I called my parents and I was like, change of plans. I'm actually not moving to New York. not working on Wall Street. I'm going to go to Turkey for a year and work at a baklava bakery. You can imagine how upset they were.
What did they say?
Scared. They were shocked. And scared. And the one rule of this fellowship was that you couldn't come back to the US for a year. By the way, this was 2008. So like the iPhone had just come out. I did not have a smartphone, still like go to internet cafes. So it's not like I could WhatsApp them every day or they'd know exactly my location. And so I moved there and, of course, I worked at a baklava bakery, but I spent a lot of time volunteering at the Armenian churches and Armenian schools there and really, immersed myself in the Armenian community because I really wanted to understand what it was like to be Armenian in Turkey. And can't believe I did this in hindsight, but I took a backpacking trip all across like the eastern part of Turkey. I went to Ani, Adana, Kars. I went to Vakıflıköy, which is like the only village that survived the Armenian genocide in that region. And it was life-changing for me on numerous dimensions. It was, on the first hand, I feel like I got to really understand what it was to be Armenian. It was such an interesting experience to feel the most Armenian I've ever felt, like in some of those towns. And of course, got to hear a lot of really difficult stories and really understand what happened. And then on a second note, it was almost like the reverse immigration experience where, not even comparing what my parents went through, but it was like for a year, I knew I had to make life work there. And there was like no other option for me, to like leave. And so I had to like figure the system out. And it just gave me a really deep appreciation. And I'm so grateful for that experience. So that was definitely the biggest risk that I've taken.
Which was worth it.
Absolutely.
I was reading about you and there were facts that were surprising. A person in venture capital, a person in finance, but you had your senior thesis on Nagorno-Karabakh.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, and you also led the Armenian community. And you're very frequently being in Armenia. So how do you feel now, like when you come to Armenia and it's a bit different than it was before?
Yeah. COVID aside, I had gone to Armenia 13 years in a row straight, every summer, spent time there every fall. And for me, it's been incredible to see, number one, just how much talent there is there. And second, just the incredible amount of work ethic. If you think about the raw ingredients for entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. A lot of them Armenians in Armenia have, right? Like, a really tough history, a DNA of survival, intellectual curiosity, strong math and science, business-minded, and then the work ethic. And so I was always so inspired to see that come through. And I just felt this like calling that I had to do something in Armenia. And it's been so incredible for me to see how the ecosystem has flourished. I think it's so amazing that we have entrepreneurs that are based here, that open offices there. I think that there's more Armenians that are going to Armenia that have never been. I get those phone calls all the time. Where should I go? What should I do? Who should I talk to? And so that's really inspiring for me.
Okay. I was going to ask you about when we were speaking about risk, I was going to ask you about what percentage of the enterprises that you invest in actually do not make it, fail. And since we spoke about Armenia and you have strong presence in Armenia as well, you're investing in Armenian businesses and startups. What would the ratio be like? In Armenia, do they fail more or less as compared to the world?
It's hard to have of course, each fund does an analysis. We call it your loss ratio mm-hmm. of how many businesses go to zero. It's more about we think more about being in the winners than how many go to zero. Mm-hmm. Because if you're in one transformational company, and it's the ratio is very, very small for those winners. There's not a lot of companies valued above 10 billion. There's even few valued above 20 billion. And it goes on and on. I think in Armenia, the unique challenge is that, for a long time, there wasn't a lot of funding. Mm-hmm. So sometimes a company can die sooner than it should because they're not able to raise follow-on funding. I think that is trending in the right direction, given a lot of the work, that folks have done there, to bolster that ecosystem, like Hive, for example. But, that's greater risk, I would say, in Armenia, capital follow-ons. The second thing is given the size of the population, you inherently need to sell an international global product kind of from day one, versus like a company that's in the US can just sell to the US market and be fine. And then third, I would say like access to talent is really important. So if you're in a talent pool that is small, it's going to be really hard and really expensive to get exceptional talent versus having like, many, many more people in that pool to pick from. So those are some of the dynamics that impact, I would say, startups in Armenia a little bit more. And not just Armenia, I'd say, many other Eastern European countries.
Yeah. Recently, I was speaking about with Darren Acemoglu about the trends of economy in Armenia, and tech sector is a big thing now. And I asked him the question, can we rely only on tech sector? And the answer was obviously no. But still, the tech sector is booming, developing in Armenia. What are your predictions? What is your prognosis about what's going to happen in Armenia in tech in, like, let's say 2-3 years or 5 years?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I hope happens. So a part of my thesis of, when I was investing in Armenia was that if there could be a demonstration of exits, IPO or acquisitions in Armenia, then capital would flood to the region because venture capitalists and angel investors and different types of investors go to places. They're always looking for where other people are not fishing. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was put Armenia on the map and prove that if you invest in Armenia-based companies, you can have really great outsized returns. And then the idea was that as those companies exit, early employees get money. They've been trained on what a successful company looks like, and then they leave and start their own
company.
So it becomes like seeding the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I think having liquidity in these exits for Armenian startups is super important. And then I think also education is very important. I admire what Sam Simonian has done with Tumo, for example, and there's many, many others. AUA has a great entrepreneurship program, but making sure that founders are having best-in-class, cutting edge, like computer science courses and business courses is really important as well.
What does an ideal founder look like for you?
Oh, well.
What does he have?
I'll give a concrete example of Ara and Vahe, Service Titan, for example. So when you meet Ara and Vahe, there's a few things that stick out. Number one, the reason why they started the company, of course, was for their dads. And they could have had any job on the planet. They graduated from Stanford and USC, but they decided to move back to Glendale and really help their fathers run their businesses. And their attachment to making their customers successful is so genuine and so authentic, where they make so many, when you join Service Titan, one of the things you have to do is actually like wake up at 5 a.m. and like go do a day in the truck with, for example, a plumber, so that you understand your end customer and what you're building for. And so Ara and Vahe have this incredible North Star orientation. They have domain expertise where they actually built this for their dads. So they understood every single part of the workflow of their end customers. And then I'd say their scale of ambition is enormous. When they found that there was something that they could do to help these men and women who really are the backbone of America be more successful, then they started to realize like, oh, wow, like they don't just have this problem. Other people in other trades have this problem. And they've really, when you meet entrepreneurs like that, I think it just becomes so clear that they are put on this planet to run this business, and they deeply care about building a company that helps their customers run their companies even more successfully.
Great example. I was watching one of your interviews lately. You were speaking about software as a system sales, and you mentioned that many companies, they did realize that what they did with pen and paper was okay, they got used to this, but now we have a solution for that. But on the other hand, from my personal experience and how I see people working, etc., we are resistant to change. So if there is a software that can solve my problem, but I know that this one works, I would be very reluctant into getting into this software. What are we thinking about this, and what would your take be on this?
Yeah, well, the reason why I am so excited about investing in vertical software, which is software built for one industry. So like software for schools, software for hospitals, software for plumbers, software for car mechanic shops, is because of a few things. First, there's been there's happening a generational transition from the business owner, the dad, the mom that's, getting into their 60s, 70s that want their son or daughter or, the shining star employee that's up and coming to start running the business. Mm-hmm. And those people are certainly not going to use pen and paper. They want to provide an Amazon-like experience to their customers, their employees, and they want to be able to run their business from their iPhone anywhere. And so that really gives an impetus when that generational transition of those businesses is happening for those new CEOs to be like, okay, what is best in class? However, they don't want to use a tool that's just like a horizontal tool, which means like, a spreadsheet for doing X, Y, and Z. They want a tool that's built by people like them, specifically for people like them. And so they start to look for someone who really understands their pain point deeply. The second thing I would say is that now with the incredible inventions in fintech and advancements in fintech like Stripe and Adyen, for example, now they can also process payments through their software. And before it'd be like your ordering system doesn't talk to your billing system. So actually like all of these synergies make it a lot more compelling to buy new software. But the bar is very high. Actually, a lot of these customers are amazing entrepreneurs in and of themselves, and they know how to run their business. And that's why being able to speak their language, tell them like, hey, look, I know your pain point. I've been there myself. Let me tell you why this is better than the software or pen and paper or on-prem system that you're using. That is really important. That's why for me, when I invest in a lot of these entrepreneurs, I really look for that. Like, Ashodat Shopmonkey, another, Armenia, born in Armenia, came to the U.S. entrepreneur that I've invested in. He would spend all his time around car mechanic shops. He loved fixing cars. He loves cars. He learned the nitty gritty of what it's like to run a car mechanic shop. And then, he had a product manager background, and he was like, wow, like, I could fix this and make this so much easier for these car mechanics. And that's what he's done. So those are really inspiring stories.
About inspiration from the other side, no successful people has ever missed any failures. And as a person who has been very successful, I'm sure you have your failure stories. Personally, I think that if you don't fail, you don't do anything. But I would really like to hear from you of some of the biggest failures that shaped you as who you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many. I'll start with the most recent ones. I think, investing is a job where failure really stares at you right in the face because, first of all, you're betting on someone else, which is very uncomfortable for people that are type A and like to be in control, like myself. So you're betting on someone else, and you are watching a very long movie that has a lot of emotional ups and downs, for example. So like, companies in 2020, 2021, it was like everybody was up and to the right, given what was going on in the stock market and like a lot of these COVID tailwinds that pulled forward all these, technology trends. And then like everything halted for 2022 and 2023, and we had like a really big market correction. And so I think in VC, you actually feel these like, intermittent failures, like a lot more, even though that the cycle of the feedback of like when the company exits is very, very long. And so you start to like iterate and learn and think, why did I make this investment? Was it the right founder? Was it the right market? Did something go wrong that was out of their control? What was in their control? And it's really great to like reflect on those learnings because that's how you get sharper and better. And so I really try to spend a lot of time thinking about how I've made decisions, how I've spent my time, where I can learn, how I can tweak every part of the venture capital job. So like one example is, we have to find the companies first. And you might think it's easy, but it's actually very difficult.
You find them or they find you?
Well, that's the thing. At Index and many of these VC funds, a lot of people will just cold email us, or like somebody will say like, hey, meet this founder. And you could probably fill up your entire calendar back to back to back, just meeting inbound companies. But then you have to ask yourself, like, am I fishing in the right pond? Do I need to spend time in another ecosystem where I'm not getting inbound? So being able to like constantly refine sourcing that we call, for example, and then of course it's the picking and evaluating, and then it's the winning, and then it's sitting on boards, and then it's exiting. So all of those things, you know, you can learn from and continue to iterate on. And that's where I think, you know, being able to identify and learn from failures is super important.
Yeah. Many people are scared to fail. That's why they don't do anything. And I know a lot of people that like, I don't want to do this because what if I fail? What would your advice to be to those people who think like, what if I fail?
Oh, there's this epic Michael Jordan quote. I'm not going to get the numbers right, but he's like, you know, when people ask me, what does it feel like to be so successful? He says, actually, the right question to ask me is, what does it feel like to have so many failures? And then he basically rattles off like 26 times in my career, I've been trusted with the game-winning shot and I've missed. He's like, I've missed 3,000, you know, baskets. I've lost 800 games or whatever the numbers are. And I think like, you know, even in tennis, like if you think about, all of these different athletes, whatever the sport is, everyone remembers actually the losses a lot more than the wins because that's where they grew the most as an individual. Mm-hmm. And so I think embracing that and seeing it as a development, of your skills or your passion, whatever it is you've decided to, you know, dedicate your life to is a really healthy mindset to have. And, you know, I know, like, for example, Jensen at NVIDIA has said in his recent, like, talks to, I think it was a Stanford class, like, my wish for you is that you have, like, a lot of hardship and failure early in your life because you really learn from that and it builds character. And so I think leaning into that is really important.
The earlier you have, the better you are going to be developed as a person. Since we're speaking about failures, has there been a moment in your life, a failure that you would think like, I'm not going to make it?
Not that I'm not going to make it, but this is really hard. You know, I think that I'm not going to, once you get to the I'm not going to make it point, it's like game over. Look, I think that for me to actually get the job that I have now was not easy. When I started interviewing for venture capital, it was a very different industry. There was not as many funds. It was extremely like network driven. It was very hard to get meetings. Venture capitalists didn't put like their names or emails on websites. It was a very different industry than what it's become now. And, I think I met with 97 people to get, 97 interviews, networking meetings, coffees, etc., to eventually get my job at Index. And there was a lot of people that told me like, you don't have an MBA. You're not going to make it. You're, like no VC firm would hire you without an MBA. You were a trader, not an investment banker. You're not going to make it. You're not technical. You're not going to make it. And I kept being like, no, like, I'm pretty sure this is what I was like put on this planet to do. And I just kept going. And the way I actually ended up at Index was one of my really good friends was like, hey, I know you've been trying to get into this industry for a really long time. She's like, there's a dinner in Palo Alto. I was in San Francisco at the time. She's like, why don't we go together? It's like some VCs will be there. Mm-hmm. And, she had to cancel last minute. And I remember it was pouring rain. The GPS told me it was going to take me 3 hours to get to Palo Alto.
Oh my God.
I was, my confidence was shot. I was exhausted. I did not want to go by myself. And I was like, I just got to show up. So I dragged myself to Palo Alto. I sat at this dinner. And just so happens, I sat next to my partner, Jan Hammer at Index. And we totally hit it off. And he was like, you need to work at Index. And then, I started interviewing and eventually ended up here. And so, I think those moments where like opportunity comes to those who are in the room, there's not a lot of points in your life where you're going to get those opportunities. So when they show up, of course, you don't know them, before the fact, but showing up and, having an open mind and connecting with people is absolutely crucial in a career.
Yeah. I mean, we were speaking about failures, how many failures you remember, the times you've lost. For me, it's like when I get to seize an opportunity, it's like good. But then I look back and say, oh, how many opportunities I have missed. Oh my God. That's also something
of course.
You should.
It's great reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe that a person is born as an entrepreneur or they can become one? Anyone can be an entrepreneur.
I think anyone can be an entrepreneur. However, I think people underestimate how difficult it is. I think you only hear about the successes. You don't hear about the failures. There's very few entrepreneurs that are getting asked to speak on podcasts about failing, to your point. You only hear about the winners. And so, I think that there's things in your raw DNA you certainly need to have. I think clarity of thinking is one. Becoming, being a great storyteller is another. Being able to really have a vision and almost like unwavering focus on the one thing that you're going to do super, super well. But I don't think it's necessarily like 100% pre-wired.
The vision and planning. Can you plan well in advance in today's world?
I mean, depends on the context. I would say if you're investing in AI or building an AI, the answer is no. I had a chance to talk to some of the top AI researchers, and even they were surprised by the twists and turns and pace that the technology has taken. And so, I think you just have to be very nimble, very open-minded, very close to the research if you're building an AI, keeping on top of all the model releases, all the tools, what the big players are doing, what the startups are doing. And that's really the founders that we tend to gravitate towards are, again, it always comes back to investing in the people. And we take a view of, look, this technology might change, this idea might change, but at the end of the day, this is the person we believe will be most resilient and also kind of see around corners because they're so, used to being in the flow of information. And so that's really important in AI specifically.
Where is AI going?
I don't know.
No,
I can tell you what we're investing in, at Index. So, everybody talks about the different layers of AI, of course, like the foundation models. Then you kind of have this like infrastructure layer, which enables you to deploy, the models. And then you have the application layer. And I think it's been very tricky because the foundation models, it's kind of already emerged that there's like a handful of players. They have a ton of capital. It's a very capital intensive game. So unless you have something that's very uniquely different, it's very difficult to invest in, the seventh or eighth foundation model at this point in time. I think like vertical AI applications is where I'm spending most of my time and where the greatest opportunity is. In this case, AI is really not the value proposition. It is a feature within a broader value proposition. So you can't go to a small business and be like, hey, we're building an AI solution to help you with, reading documents faster. You need to be like, oh, hey, I understand that you have an ERP system, you have this system and that system. I've built a workflow that you can live and breathe in all the time and basically use AI to do things faster and better. And so I think that those are really unique opportunities, and that's where I'm spending most of my time.
Okay, let's go back to your journey towards becoming who you are. As a leader, I would like to listen from you how a woman leader is dealing in the world of venture capitalists, a lot of companies approaching you, a lot of people approaching you. So what is the main leadership trait you have to have in order to be a successful one?
Yeah. I think leadership is an incredible journey of self-awareness, self-discovery, and being able to really connect with individuals. When you're a leader, you're in a position where you need to inspire, but also give feedback. You need to, carry the weight, but also give responsibility. And so there's all these balances and nuances that you have to get exactly right. I think the best thing you can do is truly work on yourself. And so, a lot of times when people take leadership roles, one of the things that they do, and I've certainly done this too, is like, for example, collect the 360 of like, what does your team think of you? How do you come across in meetings? What are things that you can do differently to inspire or give feedback, for example? And then, of course, drawing upon people's experiences that have done this journey ahead of you is really important. So finding people that you can say, look, I have this problem. I don't know how to solve it. how would you advise me to solve that? And it really is incredible. And, this is not just a tech Silicon Valley thing, but how many people are willing to share their own journey with you if you show up with like really thoughtful questions, you've studied that person's journey, you're prepared to be vulnerable and open up on your own challenges. It's really inspiring to get that. So I think it's a constant journey, and I'm always working on making sure that I can be, the best partner that I can at Index, with my partnership, with my colleagues, and with my entrepreneurs.
How do you do the line when you are the friend and you are not the friend? So that the employees, the partners, everyone. So you are there for them, but at the same time, they shouldn't take advantage of you. Where is the line?
Yeah, well, look, I think it all comes down to like setting expectations and everybody being in the same boat, rowing the same direction. And so I think the first thing that's really important is to say, like, why are we here? Like, why are we spending all this time and energy? What's the point? What is the mission and vision that we have? And then the second thing is, what are the operating norms that we are going to use to treat each other the best way possible, but also be a high performance organization? And being very open about those things, saying things like, hey, we're going to take radical responsibility, or we're going to disagree and commit, or, we're going to have like a growth mindset, which means like you're willing to take feedback and be wrong and seek, different opinions to make sure we get at the right decision. And so I think all of that is really important. And then lastly, I think actually the kindest thing you can do is to be direct. I think one of the mistakes people do is when they have to share bad news, like we're not investing, you're not getting hired, you're not getting promoted, etc. They start the conversation with all the nice things. Here are all the great things you've done, blah, blah, blah. But we're not going to do X, Y, and Z. And really the person hearing that just tunes out all that stuff because they just want to hear like the punchline. What's the decision? And what's really sad is you probably genuinely mean, all of those things, but it gets totally lost. So for example, in tough conversations, like I just start with the punchline. Like, hey, we're not going to do this investment, but let me tell you why. This is what we needed to see. We really like X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, here's what we need to see in the future. And so I think people really respect that. So treating people with that kind of respect is always something that I found to be very helpful. It's very uncomfortable for people that are not, non-confrontational and very, shy away from being direct, but you kind of just got to lean into it.
Yeah. I mean, better know for sure for the first moments than, what is the one thing that people mostly misunderstand about you? What's the main misunderstanding about Lina Achajian?
I have, because of some of the values that I talked about that I grew up with, I just feel like I have this tremendous opportunity. And I see it as a blessing that every morning I wake up and I'm like, I can't believe I have this opportunity ahead of me. And with that comes a certain amount of intensity, focus, and work ethic that can be very intimidating. And I think people sometimes don't understand the origin of like why I am so driven and so focused on winning for Index. And I think that when people get to know me, they realize that actually like, I am a pretty chill person under under all of that. But when I'm at work, I have 2 small kids at home and, I only have certain hours in the day to perform the best I can. And that means being very focused on how I use my time. That means showing up, being prepared for meetings, reading every document, the footnote in the, appendix, and really giving people that same respect that, other people also have a lot going on and you got to show up and like ready to, be your best self. And so I think that's sometimes misunderstood, but the people that know me, know
they do know.
Yeah.
And those who don't, that's okay. You have made your name as a successful venture capitalist, but what does success mean to you on a personal level? So not outside of the office, when you go home. What is success?
Well, I'm incredibly fortunate, to have an amazing co-pilot in my life, my husband, and my two small daughters. And I spend a lot of time thinking about what success looks like for our family, in terms of our first principles, our values, what we want our kids to say about us. One of the things that I've been doing since my kids were born was someone close in my life passes away, I actually write my daughters an email with a photo of that person, and I write the things I've learned from that person. And Hirac and I spend a lot of time thinking, one day, what are our daughters going to write about us? What do we want them to write about us? And that is such a different mindset, because then, whatever those things are, and you kind of like reflect on those, and you're like, oh, like I really want them to feel X, Y, and Z. And so that really is success for us. I would love that they are even closer to the Armenian culture than Hirac and I are. I don't know how that's possible, because we're pretty deep in the community, but I would love for the attachment and Armenian identity to pass on for generations through them.
Oh, that's so sweet. I mean, when you mentioned about your children writing about you, thinking about you, receiving you as you are, what would you say from the professional point of view? Do you really worry that much how people perceive you? What, let's say, reputation, what they think of you, like whether they think you are the best person, whether they think you are not so kind? Do you really think about it a lot?
I think about, so I do the same exercise with work. And just to be clear, it's not really like what my kids think about me, but what they learn from me.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about my professional career as well, I think, how do I want to, leave Index in a better place than I found it? Mm-hmm. Who are the people that hopefully, I've paid it forward to, that then go on to have incredible careers? How do I generate phenomenal returns with these deep, deep relationships with entrepreneurs? And so I think a lot about that. It's very similar to the Amazon press release, right? You write the story of what you want the product press release to look like, because that gives you such a North Star. And then you work backwards from that. Mm-hmm. So I take the same approach in my personal and professional life.
Mm-hmm. Let's speak a little bit more about the Armenian community. And since you are investing so much and involved in the community, what do you want to leave in the community as a legacy? Like later in 50 years, 100 years, what is Nina Chejan going to be famous for, especially in the Armenian community?
Oh, well, I hope it has nothing to do with me. I hope that, the work that I started with Edil Hovnanian on Hive originally was to be the first venture capital funds to invest in Armenian startups. And that was such a catalyst burst for the tech community. And, I think it attracted and inspired a lot of people to come to Armenia and spend time there. And I'm so glad that there's now dozens of venture capital funds and many, many angels and many, many folks from the diaspora investing in Armenian startups. That is incredible. I would love to see, a massive, massive exit, like I said, in Armenia. I would love to see that produce the next generation of entrepreneurs. I would love to see the Armenian diaspora be even more involved and connected to Armenia. I would love for folks in Armenia that are entrepreneurs to get a chance to spend time at Y Combinator. There's 3 Armenian companies in YC, this batch. I was in the YC batch. I went to the YC demo day when they had the first ever Armenian founders back in 2015, which was very cool. So it's been great to see that flourish. And so that really is, I think, my hope and dream, that Armenia becomes really a center for folks to be able to build incredible generational businesses while staying in Armenia, but also leveraging the talent we have as a global community.
What is one thing that the tech community is missing in Armenia?
I think it's some of the stuff I talked about, right? Like access to capital is still hard. There's no significant multi-stage fund that invests in Armenia that could write a $20 to $50 million check in a startup. Second, I would say we definitely need to make sure we're building, teaching best-in-class computer science, which I think there's some great organizations that are. We need to do more of that. And then third, I would say, just back to this concept of really putting Armenia, like having Armenia known as an area where amazing entrepreneurs are coming from. So like telling those stories, doing these, podcasts and videos that you're doing to show like this is what the brain trust of the Armenian community is, I think really goes a long way.
Oh, okay. And since not many people get to interview you, and I would really like to hear your advice for a starting entrepreneur, a person sitting in their room thinking that they want to change the world. What would your advice be for them to change the world? And do you believe that one person can really change the world?
So my advice would be, first and foremost, like really think about why, what's the problem you want to solve versus like, I want to be a founder. I'd first start from the problem of like something like you deeply believe the world should be operating a different way and you want to be part of that change. And then the second thing I would do is go talk to a handful of founders and hear their journey and kind of like pressure test, like hearing the failures, the ups and downs, the emotional, the sacrifice away from family, all of those things. I'm like, ask yourself, like, do I still want to do this? If the answer is yes, then I would start to think about who are the top 3 or 4 people you would want to bring into your company. And then it's a matter of making sure that you're constantly learning, seeking advice from folks that have done something in the industry that you're looking to build in, and making sure that you are, just have a really growth mindset to make sure the problem you're solving is big enough and that you're approaching it the right way.
Solving the problem, not being the founder, like starting with the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are very successful. They get to a point where they're like, oh, I should just start a company because it's like the next thing to do on my resume.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely, some of those, because they're so incredibly smart, are successful anyways. Mm-hmm. But, for us, like, again, it's finding someone who's like deeply, deeply obsessed with the problem that they're solving.
Love what you are doing and you will not fail ever. I wish we had more time. Well, thank you so much for this interview, and I really hope I will get a chance to have a talk with you again.
Of course. Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
With Nina Chejan, we had a very interesting conversation about risks, investment, and many other topics. Subscribe to our YouTube channel not to miss the next programs of Insight. Thank you for watching.